Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel. I hope everybody had a great weekend. My Pittsburgh Steelers found their season come to an end last night against the Denver Broncos. As you know, I really didn't watch them that much this year anyway because of their picking up of Michael Vick in the offseason. That was enough for me to just push me over the edge. And frankly, I'd had my fill of NFL football and all the shenanigans that went on in the offseason, Deflategate and everything else. Just gets a little bit too much for me at some point. However, I will admit to have watched the last three Steeler games, the last game of the regular season, and then their two playoff games against the Bengals, and then yesterday against the Denver Broncos. Really, I'm going to tell you, when they lost last night, really didn't even feel too bad about it. I can tell you there was a time not so long ago that the Steelers losing in the playoffs, maybe like how they lost to Tim Tebow after the 2011 season in Denver, coincidentally, took that one pretty hard. Taking some of their other playoff loss, Super Bowl loss in 2010 to the Packers pretty hard. These days, I have to admit, I've been converted over to being a bit bigger Pittsburgh Pirate fan, a baseball fan. And so, did I want them to win yesterday? Of course. That they lost just wasn't that big of a deal. I thought they were going to get blown out in that game anyway. They were missing some guys, some key players. They were ahead most of the game and just let down there near the end. They had a turnover. What are you going to do? So their weekend, their season's over, and that happened this weekend. And, of course, these other teams that won it was weird. Last weekend, all the visiting teams won. The away teams won. And then this weekend, all the home teams won. It's funny how that stuff works out. But before I get into the show, and actually we're going to talk about some issues, some incidents that happened this week in politics. I remind you can email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com, and you can follow me on Twitter, Dentzel Domain, all one word, no space in between, continuing to get a lot of Twitter followers, and I'm really pleased with that. There were four considerable big stories this weekend in politics. Probably even more than that. We had, of course, the Democrat debate this weekend, which they try to sneak in. If they could just have that thing on some public access channel where you needed like antenna the rabbit ears to pick it up, you'd think that the Democrat National Committee would do it that way. I think that's about how much they want any of their candidates to be seen arguing with each other. But it was last night after the football games, but on a Sunday night. And of course, today was a national holiday with Martin Luther King Day. It seems like they just tried to hide it away. They certainly do not. These Democrat debates certainly do not get the attention, the press, the media, the hype that the Republican debates do. So that went on. We had some prisoners, American prisoners in Iran released. But I want to start first with three other stories that are more political. They concern political issues, of course, but have to do with the Republicans and the interplay between all of them. Donald Trump, for the first time that I can remember, I'm not saying that he hasn't gotten booed on the campaign trail. I'm sure that has happened, but this is the first time that it was fairly notable, and he got booed in the context of attacking one of the other contenders, and that guy being Ted Cruz. He did this at a Tea Party convention in South Carolina. So most of the people there, obviously they're not going to be enemies of Donald Trump. They're there, they're listening to him talk. I do not think that they showed up there looking to boo him. I'm not saying they're big supporters, and we know that Donald Trump has been gathering all sorts of attention, selling out places. I don't know if they actually sell tickets, but you know what I mean. Packing people, standing room only, in all of these places that he's going. And I think that's the way it was this weekend for him. But as soon as he started going in on Ted Cruz, he got booed. And you can watch the videos. There are considerable boos. It's obvious that what the crowd is thinking. Now, the interesting part about this is that Donald Trump, maybe no surprise, is that he continued to do what he was doing, criticizing Ted Cruz about his Goldman Sachs connection. Ted Cruz's wife works for Goldman Sachs, and there's this loan. Did he claim it? Didn't he claim it? Did it go on the wrong line? Was he trying to cover it up? And the crowd didn't want to hear it. I think that from what I can tell, Donald Trump, as far as what he was saying up to that point, was doing okay with the crowd. But as soon as he started in on that, they didn't like it. And he just went about arguing with them, saying, well, hey, say whatever you want, but. Which is this is the nice way of saying, you all are full of it. And this wasn't the only place where he did something like that this weekend. He had an interview with ABC, and he said that Ted Cruz is a very nasty guy, and he would be terrible as president because he wouldn't be able to make any deals with the Congress because he is so hated there. Obviously, Donald Trump isn't paying very good attention. And this is what I've tried to tell all of you Trump supporters. You know, it's a funny thing, going off on a little bit of a tangent. There was a time not so long ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, where I would have, if I had put out a tweet out there, something disparaging of Donald Trump, I would have gotten some responses from some Trump supporters. Mm-hmm. And there probably would have been a couple F-bombs dropped at me. Not a lot, just a couple. On the other hand, I have more followers than ever on my Twitter feed. I've probably, since maybe 3 weeks ago, I probably have 2,500 more followers on Twitter now than I did that long ago. Maybe even more than that. And I put out a couple, once again, anti-Trump tweets out there this weekend. Not one response. And I know I have Trump supporters who follow me. I have almost 9,000 followers on Twitter now. I know at least one of them is a Trump supporter. Nothing. I put out a tweet that I tried to tell all of you about Trump and what he was going to do. Nothing. Meanwhile, a few weeks ago, with less Twitter followers, I got at least a few. Are Trump supporters starting to change? Are they starting to slowly wake up little by little by little? Because I'm not blocking them. If somebody who supports Donald Trump wants to follow me, fine by me. I'm not going to change what I'm saying on there. If they want to block me, there's nothing I can do about that. But none of them are trying to engage me in defending him, or in their process of defending him, is interesting to me. And I wonder if that's what we are seeing. Maybe Donald Trump knows this. Maybe he knows that his support is starting to slip a bit, even though you don't necessarily see it in the polls. But for him to come out and say Ted Cruz is a nasty guy, while for months saying that Ted Cruz is a nice guy, is weird to me. And there were a couple articles this weekend that caught that kind of, Donald Trump will say something, all these nice things about a person. If the person doesn't go along with him once, suddenly the person becomes the worst man or woman in the world. Kind of like what's going on with him and Hillary Clinton now. I like the Clintons, he said for many years, way back. But now Hillary is the worst person in the world. It's kind of his shtick, his modus operandi. And that he got booed trying to do that this weekend tells me something. In fact, I would say after months of almost just about being untouchable, I think we're starting to see the first cracks in his campaign. And I think the difference, the reason he's not getting away with this, with Ted Cruz, in contrast to the others, because he knows he's made fun of Ben Carson, Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, Chris Christie, all of them. The reason he's not getting away with it with Ted Cruz is because Ted Cruz maybe has a little bit of a weird personality, kind of a weird delivery. As I said last week, the mannerisms and the tone of one of those late night preachers. But I think everybody who's following politics at this time, and as we get closer to Iowa, more and more people will be following it. Everybody knows what Ted Cruz has done in the Senate. He has taken some very unpopular positions, not afraid to shut the government down, and the average person out here likes it that Ted Cruz isn't liked by his fellow senators. That's part of why, it's not all just Ted Cruz's stances and his conservatism that has got him this far. It's really because he's like the most hated guy in the most hated institution, in political institution in the United States, but he's hated because he's different than everybody else who's hated. The American people, we know that the public opinion of Congress is horrible. 10%, 9%. Even though everybody in particular likes their personal senator or representative, and most of these men and women will get reelected in come November. It's funny how that works. But a lot of Republicans know that Ted Cruz has been the only one who has tried to buck the trend, is the only one who's tried something different, and isn't bothered by being disliked by other senators, both Republican and Democrat. And that is where Donald Trump is making his mistake. He starts talking about, well, if Ted Cruz is president, he won't be able to make deals with Congress. You know what? Your average Republican doesn't want anyone to make any deals with Congress. They're sick of all the deals that the Republicans have made in Congress. Both in the House and Senate combined. I know we're talking mostly about the Senate because it's Ted Cruz, but both the House and the Senate. Your average Republican's sick of it. I think some Republicans, maybe who are more politically knowledgeable, realize that Ted Cruz shutting down for those few days, the government in, 2013 now? Seems like yesterday. Did not hurt their election chances in 2014 at all. Even though the Republican leadership said it would, it didn't. It did not. So when we hear that Ted Cruz wouldn't want to make deals with Congress, that's actually a positive. And it's interesting, though, that Donald Trump would see that as a negative. And it's the very reason I've tried to tell you since last summer that Donald Trump is the closest to an establishment candidate of anybody on that stage and who continues to be on that stage. Because he doesn't think in terms of big government or small government. He thinks in terms of making deals, which, dare I say it, is very much like John Boehner, Paul Ryan, and Mitch McConnell have thought. Right? I don't see Donald Trump shutting down the government, that even if I don't know how he could do that as president, but I don't know what he would do if he would go that far for his principles, because really I don't know what his principles are. I don't know. They seem to fluctuate, maybe not from day to day or month to month, but definitely from year to year. He would rather make a deal than stand on principle, I think. Which is, I think, what he expresses when he talks about Ted Cruz. Obviously, you can take from Donald Trump's statements that he was not a fan of the government shutdown when Ted Cruz did it in 2013. And he wants to make deals. You tell me how a deal maker is going to make government smaller. I don't know. And that, of course, then on top of that, he's a nasty guy and saying all these other things. So getting back to Donald Trump in South Carolina, maybe this is what was going through people's heads when they were hearing Donald Trump speak and him criticize Ted Cruz. You know, Donald Trump could get away with attacking those other guys because they've been, hey, Jeb Bush, fine governor of Florida. Marco Rubio, decent senator from Florida. Chris Christie fought the teachers' unions in New Jersey. Ben Carson, world-renowned, well-known surgeon. Educated, in general, good guy. But all of those men have flaws. And I guess we could put Carly Fiorina and the rest of them. They all have flaws. They've maybe been wishy-washy on the issues over the years. The problem is none of them have a defining moment like Ted Cruz does. And I know Ted Cruz has been a little slippery as well, but to shut down the government, to stand on principle, to go against his fellow senators, and be disliked, and I guess Rand Paul is the same way. The problem with Rand Paul, I think, is he's still carrying, much like Jeb Bush, carrying the wrong last name. Rand Paul, once again, also carrying the wrong last name. But Ted Cruz disliked, and he has that defining moment where he did not cave. Now, he might have done it all for himself. Look at me, look at me, look at me. I'm not sure people care at this point. In fact, if I could give some words of advice to Ted or to Donald Trump, that is, if he wants to continue on this line of attack against Ted Cruz, you're going to have to show that something like what Ted Cruz did in 2013 with the shutting down the government, how it hurt the average American. You're going to have to try to sell that. If you can't, then I think you're barking up the wrong tree, because I think that that's why a lot of people have been drawn to Ted Cruz. Not just because he's the most conservative of all the candidates on the stage, but in those times that were darkest, while the Senate was still controlled by Democrats, Ted Cruz didn't take any of their crap. Somehow, Donald Trump, you have to figure out a way to get outside that. The problem, I think, for Donald Trump is that he's not used to thinking that way. He's not used to thinking in terms of the complexity of issues, of political issues, and what's going on in the world. He thinks in terms of absolutes, and I have no wrong with seeing the difference between right and wrong and absolutes like that. But his idea, for example, of building a wall and getting Mexico to pay for it, not going to happen. Not going to happen. That's the political stance of a 17-year-old. Not that the wall is a 17-year-old issue, but getting another country to pay for it is certainly something that is very naive. For example, blocking China's goods and 45% tariff. That's the economic idea of a 20-year-old socialist, union member, or 20-year-old supporter of his dad's or her dad's union at some public community college somewhere. And we know the issues are a lot more complex than that. I just don't think that Donald Trump wants to get into that. He just wants to call everybody nasty and not nice, make promises that can't be kept. And he gets away with it because he's brash and he sees his act as being the ultimate in free speech when it's really not. At some point, things have to be serious, and that's why I said Donald Trump's political stances are not serious. You can't believe a word that he says, and he's not serious. And so when somebody like that runs up against somebody else who is serious, has been on the field of battle, has taken some very unpopular positions, at least according to that guy's fellow senators, fellow congressmen, fellow political leaders, that goes a long way. And Donald Trump is just figuring that out now. He'll probably continue on it, but I don't know what else he can say about Ted Cruz. On top of that, the birther issue. I didn't even get to that. Of course, I've talked about it, but I haven't even mentioned it in this show yet. On the birther issue, on top of all of that, does Donald Trump not understand that by bringing that up? I mean, I know that there are some Republicans that jumped in with him, and it's one more reason why I've told you that there are going to be a lot of establishment people who are going to start saying, you know what, that Donald Trump guy, he's starting to look pretty good to us. But Donald Trump will continue on that despite knowing the people who are supporting him. And that's why I've tried to tell all of you, he has no principles. Right? He doesn't care that Democrats are supporting him in his attack on Ted Cruz. He doesn't care that there are a bunch of senators in the Congress who hate Ted Cruz, senators who are directly responsible for this fiasco that the Senate and the Congress, the House, have been for several years, even under Republican control. Donald Trump doesn't care about that. He's going to continue to hammer it. And so I don't know how you could say that he would oppose these people then once he becomes president. If he comes up with some idea that Democrats and rhinos like, he's going to go with it. How do you Trump supporters feel about that? I wonder. And if there couldn't be any more on this plate, between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. It was Donald Trump swearing that, well, the reason that Iran released those prisoners is because of him. And this goes back to, once again, last year, trying to tell all of you, Donald Trump and Barack Obama become out of the same mold. They see every issue in the world, and they see they themselves at the center of it. Do the Iranians even know who Donald Trump is? They probably do. Maybe you start thinking about that he would come out and say something like that. That just shows you, once again, inside his personality. Him going after Ted Cruz and continuing to go after him after a bunch of conservatives boo him. Him calling Ted Cruz a nasty guy after getting along with him for several months. And then Donald Trump taking credit for prisoners being released in Iran. What else do you need to know? What else do you need to know about this guy? And you want him to be president. That certainly sounds... I know that there have been people out there who have said, well, Marco Rubio, he's the Obama of the Republicans who are running right now. Not even close. We're going to get to Marco Rubio. Not even close. Donald Trump is the Barack Obama of this year's nomination process. Defines everything about him, what he did, and just like Barack Obama always referencing himself and every speech that he makes, Donald Trump will do the same. And for all of you political pundits, especially on the right, people who have been leading regular conservatives for years, you are partly responsible for how far he has come. How long ago was it? Not long ago, Rush Limbaugh dismissing that, well, Donald Trump, he's not talking about freedom and liberty and the Bill of Rights and all of that. Well, he doesn't have to. Okay. He just thinks of in the terms of winning and losing and strong and weak. That is not how the United States is defined. It's not. But this is where we've come to. It's gotten to the middle of January, where Donald Trump should have dropped out months ago had things been more objective. And now he's getting booed by conservatives. I don't know what to tell you. I tried to tell you. And in the process, which I always like to bring up, in the process of some conservatives who have been propping up Ann Coulter and others, some other good selections got dropped because they couldn't, all of the air was being sucked out of the room by Donald Trump. I mean, really, it's a miracle that anybody else is still even in the race, given how much media attention Donald Trump has gotten. Scott Walker, Bobby Jindal, Rick Perry, all gone, I would say, in one way or another because of Donald Trump. Men who I would say would be much better leaders of this country than Donald Trump. They are the collateral damage of what has been going on with Donald Trump. And I tried to tell you months ago, I saw this weekend coming, where he would start to get booed. You could never see Scott Walker getting up there and saying that about Ted Cruz, could you? Bobby Jindal, Rick Perry, those guys? Any three of them would have gotten up in front of the Tea Party people in South Carolina and been cheered. So Donald Trump, I think, in the end, has been a negative in all of this. I really do. But he's still in front of the polls, I guess, in South Carolina and New Hampshire. We'll see what happens. We'll see if his poll numbers start to change. Because I think there's finally cracks there, and I think probably others are going to be smart enough to start exposing them and using them for their own advantage. We can only hope, but I got to go to the break. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
Talk radio the way the founding fathers would have done it.
I'm just a man trying to make his mark on history.
Red State Talk Radio.
Accuracy and range are a necessity. Now comfort is an option as well. Nemo Arms introduces the Omen 300 Win Mag. The Omen 300 is perfectly balanced for reduced recoil, creating sub-minute of angle accuracy. And fit for the tightest of tolerances. The Omen is offered in carbine or full-length models with a 10 or 14-round magazine. American-made, owned, and designed. Nemo Arms is setting a new standard in modern sporting rifles. Find out more at nemoarms.com.
Less than 2% of America's population volunteers to defend our nation. Though we rarely see them, we live the benefits of these heroes' sacrifices in the freedom we know and the safety we feel. Each and every day, the Gary Sinise Foundation serves our nation by honoring our defenders, veterans, first responders, and their families. We do this by creating and supporting unique programs designed to entertain, educate, inspire, strengthen, and build communities. The Gary Sinise Foundation has grown because the need has never been greater. Together, we'll improve the lives of thousands of American heroes and their families day in, day out, all year long. While we can never do enough to show our gratitude to our nation's defenders, our veterans, our first responders, and the families who stand by them, we can always do a little more. Join us. Visit GarySiniseFoundation.org.
Hi, I'm Gil Fulbright. The people that run my campaign, they've made this commercial, and I'm in it. This campaign, it's not about me. It's about crafting a version of me that'll appeal to you. A version that visits random work sites with paid actors pointing at things. A version of me that doesn't find old people loathsome or pointless. Has a conventionally attractive yet curiously still family. Listening to my constituents, legislating, these are things I don't do. What I do is spend about 70% of my time raising funds for re-election. I'd do anything to stay in office. My name's Gil Fulbright, but hell, I'll change my name to Phil Goldbright, or Bill Fulbright, or fill up my mouth with farts. These are the things that are important to me. And these are the fine people that finance my campaign. Now, in order to do these things, I have to stay in office. And to stay in office, I have to keep these guys happy. Now, if any of these things make these guys unhappy, well, my hands are tied. So come November, the choice is clear. You want another spineless mouthpiece for special interest and lobbyists? Or a spineless mouthpiece for special interest and lobbyists? I'm Philip a Mouth with Farts, and I approve this message.
And we are back at the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I told you I had a couple other issues regarding what happened this weekend. I didn't know I'd go that long on Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, but I think that was a defining moment this past weekend. Let's go on to another defining moment with somebody totally different, and that is Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio made a big mistake this weekend. If you haven't heard, he said that undocumented immigrants, so illegal immigrants, who are here in the United States but have no record, have not broken the law, and who haven't been here who've been here for a while should get to stay. I think this is going. There's another debate that's going to happen right before the Iowa caucuses. I think the date is January 28th, so that's 10 days from now. And this is going to be, it should be a big question. And I think the moderators, I forget, is it a Fox News debate? I forget. they're going to have to bring this up because this is about as explicit as he has been regarding his attitude toward immigration and illegal immigrants in the United States. He says if you are a felon, illegal immigrant, then you're going to have to be sent back. But for all of those who have not committed felonies, they get to stay. Now that kind of sounds a little to me like amnesty. Something, and see, this is why I think that in this continuing debate between Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, see, Ted Cruz knows where Marco Rubio stands on this. And I realize that Ted Cruz done a couple things out there regarding immigration that are not as conservative as we would like either. But this is still a big deal for Marco Rubio because it sounds to me like he has been arguing against this for at least a while. He says his position hasn't changed. It's gotten so convoluted that it's hard to say. My attitude toward Marco Rubio and immigration is, you got to drive one block and all you have to do is go right down the street, straight east for one block. And Marco Rubio, to get there, he tries to go, makes a right here, makes a left here, gets on the bus, takes a taxi, goes down this alley, walks a little bit, gets on another bus, then gets back in his car and gets to his destination. He wants you to get bored with following him around through all these permutations of what he's done and where he's been and what he said, whereas really he's going to the same thing. He's just hoping you'll stop following him at some point. That's the attitude I get with him and immigration. I think that he is hampered by his own family roots. And I have nothing wrong with it. I don't care that he's Cuban. I don't care. But I've brought up the example, biologically, my genes come from Ireland and England. Marco Rubio is, one generation removed from that. Biologically, I'm 2 generations removed from those European countries, and I feel no connection to them whatsoever. They could become totally socialist, and I wouldn't care at all. But that Marco Rubio cares so much about immigration, and it's obvious to me that his heritage has something to do with that, and I think that's wrong. He makes fun of Ted Cruz when Ted Cruz makes fun of New York values. Well, it seems to me that Marco Rubio views people from Cuba and these illegal immigrants in a different way from real Americans, from legal Americans. Right? There's something about it that he has a connection to them. I mean, would he care as much about this if his last name was Smith or McCoy? Right? Or he had a German last name or a Slovakian next name, or if he was Italian, he was from Italy or something like that. Would he? I don't know. I'm not sure. It just seems that. Maybe it just seems that way. And so I think that within him, there is a bit of guilt, maybe a bit of hypocrisy that pops up inside him when he thinks about getting tough on it, starts thinking tough on illegal immigration, that he just can't stick to one argument for it, against it. If he's against it, then he starts thinking about his own family. If he's for it, then he knows that he's going to get in trouble with voters. Well, I got to tell you, Marco Rubio, you got to ditch the heritage. You got to ditch it. You're an American now. I don't care what you should forget what your last name is. You should forget where your family came from. You're an American now. Since you view all Americans the same, you got to forget about it, and you start thinking about your ideology first. Forget where you came from. Pretend you came from Mars. If you want to get back into this race, and I'm going to get to the third part of this, but third big issue from this weekend. But he just came right out and said it, and we all know the other candidates, they're not going to forget that. Probably especially somebody like Jeb Bush. To a lesser extent, maybe Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, but Jeb Bush, he's going to jump on what Marco Rubio said about undocumented immigrants being allowed to stay here. Now, what's the alternative? Not too long ago, Donald Trump mentioned, well, we'll just have to, in my words, not his words, in my words, hunt these people down and send them back. And see, that's the tough part about all of this, is that if they're here and they're illegal, we should send them back. They shouldn't, whatever should happen, they shouldn't be here. And I think that's also a point of issue, a problem that Marco Rubio has when he starts thinking about this topic. Because immediately visions of police breaking down doors and violating people's rights, even regular Americans' rights, real Americans, citizens of the United States, in an effort to enforce sending all of these illegal immigrants back. I think that that's what comes into people's heads. And dare I say it, that's kind of what Donald Trump made it sound like when he said that a month or two ago. And unfortunately, I think that pops into Marco Rubio's head. Whereas he could get away if he was willing to ditch the guilt, I think, that he has in him regarding his own heritage and coming here. And his family being here. That we can do this. You don't necessarily have to hunt these people down. All you have to do is say, if you run into them, they get sent home. If you happen upon them, they get a speeding ticket. And you happen upon, this person, well, you're not supposed to be here. Going to have to send you back. You're not sending them back because they got a speeding ticket. In fact, we'll probably excuse them speeding. They're being sent back to wherever they came from because they're not supposed to be here. Whereas limiting it to sending felons back, do you really think any of these countries want to take back anybody who committed a murder or something like that in the United States? I don't know. That'll probably be a problem. I realize there's no easy answers in this, but you can't say what Marco Rubio said. You just have to say, the law, if I'm president, the law I'd like to see is, if an illegal immigrant, we're not going to break down doors looking for these people. We are not going to do that. However, we may have some immigration people who show up at some work sites where we happen to know illegals might work. That might happen. And if any illegal immigrant gets pulled over in a car and once again went through a stoplight, went through a stop sign, was speeding, didn't use their turn signal, and we find out that person, man or woman, is in here illegally, they're getting sent back to. Doesn't matter how long they were here. Doesn't matter if it splits up their family. If they have children, guess what? Children get sent back too. We cannot allow these people to benefit from them breaking the law. That's what he should have said. The most important point being, we are not going to violate Americans' rights, citizens' rights to enforce this. We'll enforce it if we can. That seems like a reasonable position that most Republicans, I think, can get with. But you start talking about busting down doors on one hand or just letting illegals run all over the country on the other hand, those are not feasible positions. But Marco Rubio didn't say that. He's now on the record. He was videotaped saying it. He said it on Meet the Press, which I'm going to guess some people were actually watching. Well, you better start the spin machine right now. And I don't mean on his washer. So that was a significant point this week. And the third one also has to do with Marco Rubio, but we're going to pull Jeb Bush into this. Jeb Bush is now pulling ahead of Marco Rubio in South Carolina. Remember that guy Jeb Bush that so many of you wrote off months ago and back in, I'm going to say October, earlier November, I told you he's not going anywhere? And you know I'm no fan of Jeb Bush, but I know that he has a lot of smart men and women on his team, maybe people I don't respect, but people who I know are smart and they know the nomination process and they have a much better ground game and they understand the process better than probably Donald Trump's people do. Well, here Jeb Bush is suddenly getting into third place in South Carolina, of all places. Given Jeb Bush, you'd think, well, should do well in Iowa. Well, he should do well in New Hampshire. Maybe he should do well in Nevada. But here he is making inroads in, and just so you know what the numbers are, Donald Trump is still out in front by a wide margin in South Carolina, 32%. Ted Cruz at 18%. Jeb Bush is now at 13%. Marco Rubio is at 11%. It should be noted that Bush jumped from 5th to 3rd. He jumped over Marco Rubio and Ben Carson to get to that third place. Granted, it's close. It's within the margin of error between him and Rubio. But this just shows you how quickly things can change. I don't know necessarily what it means for the other states. If you remember that Newt Gingrich won South Carolina in 2012, and then he came down here to Florida and got his clock cleaned by Mitt Romney. Maybe that'll happen. That would be weird if both Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz got demolished in their home state. That would, I can tell you, that would surely debilitate both of their campaigns. And they have to be thinking long and hard about that at this point. But Jeb Bush, here's what I also expect. I expect that his name is going to start climbing in the ranks in other states as well. I'm not saying Iowa, maybe a little too late for that. In New Hampshire, might be a little too late for that. But other states after South Carolina, I told you, he's not going to drop out. Jeb Bush is not Scott Walker, who was doing this for the first time and maybe had some problems raising money and hadn't been down this path before. Jeb Bush has, with his dad and his brother. He's not Ben Carson, who's coming into politics from a totally different industry. Jeb Bush isn't Carly Fiorina, who had a failed run for senator or governor of California. Which was it, senator or governor? I forget. Jeb Bush is an accomplished politician. Governor of what at the time was the 5th or 4th most populous state in the country. Was well liked while he was governor. Probably more well liked than Rick Scott is as governor of this state. And even though I know that I don't like him regarding immigration, I don't like him regarding Common Core, I don't particularly care for another Bush being president, but I do respect him and his team's ability for him to stay in the race. Something that I think all of you all think of that other stuff, the Common Core, the immigration, him being another Bush, you think, oh, he has no chance. And you kind of show him some disrespect. And because of that, you think, well, people aren't going to take him seriously. Surely people wouldn't vote for another Bush. And I agree with you on that. But see, for me, it doesn't get to the point where I start dismissing him. As I said back when Mike Murphy did an interview, was it Ricochet.com or somewhere, started making all these points about the money and here's what he's going to do here. And I can remember back at the time, a lot of other people hearing that same interview and just completely dismissing. Mike Murphy doesn't know what he's talking about. And I think I remember saying he wouldn't say all of this if he didn't think it was true. Now, he doesn't have control over the campaign. He's just running a super PAC for Jeb Bush. But he would not go out on a limb like that. And if he thought that Jeb Bush was going to quit next week, and that the next week would have been the beginning of December at the time. These people, just keep in mind, I don't like them. I don't like their values. I think they're wrong in the issues. But I don't necessarily think that they're stupid. That they have a plan. Whether they can execute it, I don't know. But they do have a plan. And given their experience, they're going to stick around for a while. So Jeb Bush, third place in South Carolina. What if he passes up Ted Cruz? What if he gets into second place? Then what? Maybe it means nothing, just like Newt Gingrich winning that state in 2012 meant nothing. But surely Jeb Bush is probably a little bit more experienced in all this than Newt Gingrich was. So those were the three big stories that really caught my eye. I think all of them are going to have lasting impressions in this race. And I'm not saying there won't be something that happens this week, more statements, more polls. There's going to be a lot that's going to be happening. I think you're going to see that it's going to be ramping up quite a bit now that voting is going to be starting. Remember, all this right now has just been practice. Doesn't mean anything. As Mike Tomlin, coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, would say, it's just football in shorts. That's all practice is. Got the shoulder pads on, you got the helmet on, but everybody's wearing shorts and they're just jogging around. And everybody looks great. Everybody looks like a Hall of Famer like that. That is what's been going on to this point. There have been some scrimmages, otherwise known as debates. Have a few arguments, just like in training camp, you see some video of players who are normally friends getting into it. Well, now the games are coming up. The schedule's starting. First game of the year in Iowa. Now it starts to matter. And people start thinking their jobs are on the line. They want to stay on the roster. They better do something. They got to make an impression with the coaches and the coaches in politics. You know who the coaches are? The voters are the coaches in politics. So you're going to see a little bit more desperation. You're going to see a little bit more arguing. And when that happens, more mistakes are going to be made. There's going to be long touchdowns, but there's also going to be interceptions. And I think it's going to get really good within the next couple weeks. But before I go, I want to remind you can email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Dentzel Domain, all one word, no space in between. You can find my books at Amazon.com. Just do a search for Edward Dentzel there. Love for you to download them to your Kindle in a matter of moments. You can go to edwarddentzel.com, where you can find all of my old Red State Talk Radio shows. If you go to edwarddentzel.com/book, you can download the first chapter of my next novel called The Comebacks. You may just like it. You can also find my show at Podbean, SoundCloud, in the iTunes Store, and at YouTube. You can also find me on Facebook and LinkedIn. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.